a PowerPoint presentation by Allie Selman, and we're going to be talking about farmers and health conditions that affect them. So, the population that I've chosen to talk about is farmers. Just a simple definition of a farmer is one who is involved in agriculture, who raises field crops of food or material, and commonly they also raise livestock. That doesn't have to be every farmer, but it is pretty often that they raise their own crops and they also raise livestock. Some reasons that they would be more inclined to have some health disparities are because they are exposed to extreme weathers, whether that is the sun in the summertime, snow, lots of wind, really the extremes, because they have to be able to work outside, so they work in all types of weather. A lot of farmers operate heavy machinery, tractors, combines with balers, just many types of machinery that can be dangerous. They don't have much time off, so they don't really get to have some self-care. If farmers choose to use pesticides, they have exposure to those toxins and of pesticides and everything. Depending on if they have animals, they have to deal with temperaments of animals. So if their animals are wild, they could be mean, they could be, bucked off of a horse or trampled by a cow. There's just many options there. And then they also live in rural areas, so there may not be access to health care. And a lot of times farmers are self-employed, so they may not have the most high-quality health insurance. For size reference, locally, so where I'm located is in Box Elder County, Utah. And in Box Elder County, there are 1,187 farms and 2,094 farmers. Statewide in the state of Utah, 18,409 farms, 32,495 farmers. Nationally, over 2 million farms and over 3 million farmers. And then internationally, there's over 2 billion farmers, and many more that are involved in agriculture. They get their livelihood from agriculture, I guess I should say. So obviously there's more nationally than there are locally, but for being a small town, where I'm from, this is a pretty good percentage of the state that is farmers. And for national purposes, the majority of farmers are located in Texas and the Midwestern states, and Utah doesn't make the top 10 of agriculture producing states. So some contributing factors that contribute to the social determinants of health are there's not much availability for resources. There's not much access to healthcare if they live in a rural area. They are exposed to that environment and the weather. They have exposure to toxic substances and exposure to physical hazards. For availability of resources, if they are in a really rural area, there's often no grocery stores, no gas stations, things like that. They have to travel quite a distance to get to those. Access to healthcare, if there's no grocery store, there's probably not going to be a hospital, or at least they have to travel a distance to get there. And like mentioned earlier, the environment and the weather can be extremes on both ends. Exposure to those pesticides, and then the physical hazards of the machinery. So specifically on those concerns, the physical specifics would be the weather, specifically, the heat in the summertime. Maybe their skin's getting sunburned, they aren't dressing appropriately to prevent those sunburns. Getting heat stroke in the wintertime, the snow, they have to work in the snow so they could get the frostbite, or they could have to be driving on bad roads. The machinery, often they are working with balers, and balers have this thing called a PTO shaft, and it spins rapidly, and if you get caught up in that, it takes seconds for it to take your life. You have to be extremely careful when working with that. Combines, learning how to run the machinery, making sure that there's nobody around. Toxic materials, the pesticides that they spray on their crops. Psychosocial, a lot of times farmers are isolated and they might be family farm, and so there's not much social interaction. They really just interact with their families and those that work on the farm, and they don't really get out into the communities a lot or outside of the state even. So there could be some isolation issues. And then economic concerns. Agriculture varies so much year to year depending on what the price of the crops are going to be or what the price of the animal market is going to be. So one year a farmer might do great, and one year they might barely make ends meet. One year they might not even make the ends meet. This factors in the market, and if there was predators for the animals, if the weather killed their crops, or if there was some type of disease that went through. So there's many things that can fluctuate the economic system. One of the many root causes, but one that I focused on, was the access to healthcare. The root cause of that is if they live in a rural community, they don't have access to that. They would be a long distance from healthcare, and because of that, because of the time it takes to travel far away and to take the time to go into a doctor, they might delay or even altogether avoid treatment if needs be. And even further than that, if they don't have health insurance, then they're going to delay and avoid that even further. So Maslow's hierarchy, we go from physiological to safety to love to esteem and then to self-actualization. So we're going to talk about needs that are met. So in that pyramid, the needs that are met are the physiological needs, which would be like their food, water, sleep, sex, homeostasis, safety, security, employment, morality. Love and belonging is friendship and family. Esteem is confidence and respect of others, achievement, and self-actualization is morality, spontaneity. Sorry, I can't say that word. Spontaneity, acceptance of the facts. So physiologically, they don't. I feel like farmers have met this because a lot of times they grow their own food. They have gardens. They have their own animals. They have their own wells for water, and for the most part, they get enough sleep. Safety, if you'll notice, I have that on the met and the unmet section, and so that will be talked about later. So for the met, they have a security of employment because they are self-employed. They know how to use their own resources. They own, a lot of times they own their property too. It doesn't belong to somebody else. Love and belonging, they work on a family farm maybe, so they have friendship and families. Esteem, they have confidence. They take a lot of pride in their achievements that they have. And then self-actualizations, they have creativity to make things work. They problem solve. They accept the facts. They are very go with the flow. They realize they can't change the weather or the prices, but they still go with the flow and make it work each year. For unmet, I just put safety here because sometimes their jobs might not be the most secure, nor is their income. Depending on the year, like I said, and the price of everything, they might not have a great year financially, or they might have a really difficult year. They also are constantly dealing with dangerous things, and so their health and their safety is not always secured. Sometimes their property might not always be secure too if they lease it from somebody else, or that's like BML ground or something. BLM ground, sorry. The anticipated function I put is high functioning. Farmers are very independent, high functioning. They take care of themselves. They don't rely on others. They're hardworking. And likely health outcomes is it varies on the farmer if they take care of themselves, which a lot of them do. They're exposed to more, I feel like, than the average individual, but if they wear masks around the toxins, they take extra caution with the machinery, they wear correct clothing in the weather, and they utilize the healthcare, then I feel like they take care of themselves and maybe would be healthy. But the issue is that sometimes farmers don't worry when there's a problem, and unless it seems serious, so they might not seek like your preventative health care in time to be able to have a good health outcome for that. Some specific concerns for infections and diseases are zoonotic diseases. So zoonotic diseases are things that come from animals like Campylobacter, Salmonella, swine flu, avian influenza, E. coli, Lyme tick disease. farmers are prone to these because they work with animals, they work with the ground, they work with insects, things like that. Another interesting article I found was that some viruses and bacteria can be increased because of a drought. A lot of times farmers are dealing with a drought, and so they might be increased risk to get these. So the viruses, protozoa, bacteria would increase because they use private wells, and when there's a drought, these things increase in their wells. Respiratory and GI diseases. And so if there's a drought, they're cautious with their water, so they might not be maintaining their hygiene or washing their hands. And then with the E. coli and Salmonella, they would be using recycled water to water their fields, or they might not be washing off their produce or washing their hands. Reasons or some ideas to prevent this is to just keep hygiene and importance and make sure to use PPE. Like use your mask if you need to, or wear gloves. Some non-communicable diseases I found were some respiratory illnesses. So there's an article I found that talked about respiratory illnesses with farmers. They can get farmer's lung, which is when they inhale mold spores. And it can cause like flu-like symptoms, and even it can lead to death. And so an important thing for that is to wear masks when they're dealing with like grain bins that might have mold in them, or they make sure to bale their hay in a good temperature or good precipitation control and humidity control. The organic dust toxicity syndrome is when they're exposed to like the dust in the grains in the barns, and then asthma and hay fever. Many farmers suffer from it. It's from the pollens they deal with, dander, grain, hay. So many things can cause it. And an important thing with that is to know what triggers them and to try to avoid it, and have a plan if you do come in contact with it. Have your inhaler with you or a nebulizer, or know when you need to go seek treatment. For self-care and self-harm, I felt like farmers would be like a medium to high risk for self-care deficits, just because farmers don't really worry about themselves. Their livelihood is revolved around making food and crops for others. They get up early, go to bed late. They don't really take time off. The only thing that makes it hard is they don't have self-care habits because they are so involved in caring for others and their families. And also, a lot of farmers really enjoy their job. They wouldn't be in the agriculture business if they didn't love it. And so to them, farming is a type of self-care. I would say farmers are a low risk for intentional self-harm because they know if they are hurt, they don't do the work, it's not going to get done because nobody's going to do it for them. They have so many things to worry about that in a way they don't even have time to think about self-harm. They're also often educated in weapon safety with like guns and knives because they have to deal with those things, if they're hunting predators or something. They're able to work outside, get some vitamin D, be in the sun, enjoy nature, and so they have a lot of time to think about and reasons to keep them here. They are at a higher risk, I would say, for unintentional self-harm because of the hazardous chemicals, dangerous machinery, the temperament of animals. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong on a farm. It's a very dangerous job. Importance would be to teach people to be cautious, make sure that the younger farmers are being taught the risks of farming, and that maybe it'd be a good idea to educate farmers on self-care and how to take some time away from their farm. They are not really a risk. I feel like they're a low risk for harm by others and also to others. For other people, the only harm I could really think of is maybe some anti-agriculture people. For instance, PETA, who dislike farmers and ranchers and come around and try to shut down farms. And definitely there's times when farmers, when they aren't being acceptable and they need to have some disciplinary actions taken. But for the most part, they're really just trying to do their job and trying to feed America. And there are low risk for others. The risk I could think of where if their animals maybe got out of a fence and a car hits the animal on the road, it could injure somebody. Or if somebody that doesn't know about the machinery gets near it and gets injured. And then if farmers weren't around, it would decrease the food supply by a lot. So that would be a harm to others if others wouldn't get that food supply. And here are my references. And that's the end.